Hi guys, I wanted to compare the Auto ISO on Canon 5D Mark II and Nikon D800. Auto ISO for my kind of shooting is extremely helpful, but that's one of the things I was pretty frustrated with in Canon 5D Mark II. And consequently, that was a really big selling point for me for going the D800 route. So what I do is I do quite a lot of people photography, oftentimes in low light, during travel or whatever. This is, portraiture, travel, lifestyle photography. And Auto ISO, what it does, it really allows you to just take one thing off your mind, especially, and if it works well, it's just one less thing to think about. That you can, focus on composition and catching the right moment. But the problem with 5D is that Auto ISO is not really customizable in any way, and it generally uses too slow of a shutter to freeze the motion and to prevent camera shake. So oftentimes I would shoot with 35mm lens, and if I turn on Auto ISO, Canon would pick 1/30th of a second as a shutter speed. And with a 35mm lens and my kind of shaky hands, first of all, it did not really prevent camera shake. If that was 1/40th, 1/50th of a second, that probably would be significantly better. But 1/30th for a 35mm lens is just too small. Let alone the fact that it's way too slow to freeze motion, especially when people are walking. It's just too slow, and really there is no way to customize Auto ISO on 5D Mark II in any way. Also, there is no Auto ISO in manual mode. If you go to manual mode, you can kind of select Auto ISO, but what it does, it defaults to ISO 400 and it stays like that. So really, it's not really Auto ISO. So on this camera, oftentimes, I really wanted to use Auto ISO, but it was not practical. I did not use Auto ISO because it really did not serve its purpose. What I would get is blurry pictures, and that's something I wanted to avoid. The D800, however, it's absolutely spectacular with regard to Auto ISO. It's so much better than 5D Mark II, and it is also significantly better than 5D Mark III. Okay, so let's go very briefly through all the cool things about Auto ISO in D800. First of all, how you turn it on, it's a lot faster than on the Canon. If you press the ISO button, you change the ISO with the rear dial, and you turn on and off it with the front dial. On the Canon, what you have to do is you press ISO, and you scroll down all the way past low to auto. The problem is if you are, say, at ISO 3200, and if you want to go into automatic, you press this and you scroll down all the way, right? And it's a pain in the ass. And if you want to go back, you got to do it again. Here, it's just faster. a small thing, but really appreciate it. Secondly, so Auto ISO here, what it did, let me go to aperture priority and say I'll go down with ISO to automatic. And what it would do is, okay, it is a little too much light here to really show this, but here the camera would pick 1/30th of a second. It would sense what the focal length is, and it would set the shutter speed to a value that would prevent camera shake theoretically, and set the ISO accordingly so that you would get a proper exposure. The problem with Canon is that it picks 1/30th of a second for a 35mm lens, and for me it was too low. Here, this one, well, first of all, it picks 1/40th of a second, which is nice. But the coolest thing about this is that you can customize this. So if you go to ISO sensitivity settings and you select, oh well, we can ignore this one, but we turn the auto ISO sensitivity is on, and I go to minimum shutter speed. And if you select auto, the camera will figure out what the focal length is, and it will use a shutter speed appropriate for this focal length. But you can customize this. So if you go to auto, you can select shutter speeds +2 stops and or -2 stops. So instead of for this lens that would be 1/40th by default, but you could select it to be 1 stop faster, that is 1/80th, or 2 stops faster, that would be 1/60th of a second, or 2 stops or 1 stop slower if you've got steady hands, or if you've got vibration reduction, right, or image stabilization for you Canon guys. This is really cool. If you've got shaky hands, you may select the auto ISO to select 1 stop faster shutter speeds, and that should do the trick. And so this is very cool, and this is something that even 5D Mark III does not have, and yeah, which is ridiculous. One more thing, you know, in minimum shutter speed, you can customize it even you know, in a different way. You can just select what is the minimum shutter that the camera should use. So this would come in handy if you're shooting action, and if you want to freeze motion, well, you could select, I don't know, 1/1000th of a second if you want to freeze motion, and the camera would not go below 1/1000th, but would bump ISO accordingly to expose properly. From what I heard, in Canon, you can only select speeds up to 1/250th, I think. Here, you have no such a limitation. You can go all the way up to 1/4000th. So, for example, if you you know, if you've got quite a lot of motion, but like people, for example, you may go a little slower, like 1/100th or 1/25th, something like that. So this is really cool. And even better is that if you want to have absolute control, especially in low light situations, what D800 does is it allows you to use auto ISO in manual mode. In manual mode, that is, you select what the shutter speed the camera should use and what aperture it should use, and the ISO will be adjusted to expose properly. And the best thing is that you still have the possibility to set exposure compensation. For example, if you have a backlit subject or you want to depict your scene in a particular way, if you want to, expose some more, you can still use exposure compensation, and the Auto ISO will take that into account. So, for example, if I were shooting, people in a bar and wanted to prevent camera shake, but not go with an ISO too high, even though the camera does really well at high ISOs, what I would probably do is I would, shoot wide open for shallow depth of field, and I would set, shutter speed to about 1/50th or 1/60th of a second, and set the exposure compensation that would be appropriate for a scene, and then the ISO would take care of everything. So in low light situations, basically the only thing I would do is I would take care of the exposure compensation, and the camera would expose properly by adjusting the ISO. So this thing is absolutely terrific. I guess 5D Mark III does have Auto ISO in manual, but it does not have exposure compensation, which means that, if the meter in a camera is off, your entire exposure will be off, and you really have no way to prevent that in 5D Mark III. In Mark II, really you have no customization, you have no Auto ISO in manual, so Auto ISO here is really, it's a theoretical feature. You can't really use it. Here, it's absolutely spectacular. I absolutely love it. If you have quite a lot of light, but it changes, or you just want to fire and forget, you could go into aperture priority and just set Auto ISO, and if the camera had too much light, like here, it just would bump the shutter speed to expose properly, and if it had too little light, it would bump ISO, but still it would still respect the minimum shutter speed, either set by you manually for a particular value, or based on the lens and its focal length and the correction you set. So all in all, Auto ISO lets you just forget about ISO. What I did, I set my max Auto ISO to be high 1, because it seems to be pretty usable. And within those limits, that is from ISO 100 to high 1, I just can forget about ISO. And this is something, that you don't really have to think about. It allows you to focus your attention on something more important than technicalities in photography. So all in all, Auto ISO in D800 is spectacular. It's absolutely great. Sure, probably this adjustment here, it could have come in half stop or 1/3 of a stop increments, but well, yeah, it's the best you can get right now, and I'm really happy with how Nikon did that, and I actually plan to use it most of the time with this camera. So I hope you liked it, and I probably will upload some more videos that would compare how Nikon D800 and 5D Mark II compare. Obviously this is an older camera, but this is something I currently have, and it's interesting to see how certain things have been done by Nikon and Canon, and I also have noticed a couple of things that are actually better on 5D Mark II than on D800, even though this is an older camera. Okay, so thanks a lot and stay tuned.